Hey everybody, welcome to the show Board Game Reviews. This week we've been looking at Warhammer Quest Cursed City. Now this is a cooperative game for 1 to 4 players, and in this video I'm going to give you my final review of the game. Now if you just want to see a quick overview, learn how to play the game, actually see some sample gameplay, check out the other videos in the series, come on back after the break for a full review of Warhammer Quest Cursed City. Warhammer Quest Cursed City is a cooperative dungeon crawling game for 1 to 4 players. Your average missions are going to play from anywhere from 90 to 120 minutes, depending on what kind of mission you're picking. Some are going to be faster, some are going to be slower. Now, Warhammer Quest itself is going to be one of the most polarizing cooperative games you will ever play. This is a game you're either going to really love it or you're really going to hate it, depending on what kind of gamer you are when it comes to your cooperative dungeon crawling games. This is a game that has some extreme cinematic moments, but it's also a game that feels at the same time it may need a whole bunch more balancing, depending on how you feel about this game. Because some of these missions, you're going to have your ogre who's going to wade into the mission. He's going to take out literally piles of enemies without taking any damage. If he does manage to take a little bit of damage, he has some wonderful abilities that allow him to heal back up, to bring his health back up and continue slaughtering all these enemies, because that's just how overpowered the heroes really feel in this game. Of course, this all comes to a screeching halt once the heroes go against the bad guys, because the bad guys are pretty much where I feel this game was really designed to be a game that was balanced the way it should be. Now, admittedly, Warhammer Quest is not trying to be a super strategic game, much akin to games such as Gloomhaven. This is very much a game that is all about the classic dungeon crawl. This is about the heroes going deep into a dungeon and taking out bad guys. But it feels at times where the game is not fully balanced. It feels like very strange when you are going to take one of your heroes, such as the ogre, who is literally going to walk into a room where you're going to have a horde of enemies, and he's literally going to wade knee deep into this horde of enemies. He's going to slaughter them basically as fast as you can add them to the board. He's going to be one-shotting skeletons down with rolls of the dice, and basically once in a while the bad guys are going to manage to hurt the heroes, but heroes such as the ogre, some of the more powerful heroes, are going to shrug off wounds very, very quickly, which makes it feel like this game is super cinematic. But I don't think cinematic was really what I was going for. It really feels like all these basic missions, the randomized missions, are the missions in the game that are not balanced. The only thing that was really balanced were the 5 missions, where you're going out for the grand bosses, because those were the places where I felt the challenge, those are the places where I felt the great design, and those are the places where I feel like the game was actually done well. The rest of it just feels like a prequel to the fun game that you should be playing. Now, there are a few good things about Warhammer Quest. I do enjoy the fact that the enemies are controlled by a very nice direct AI system. It's going to be very nice. We're going to roll a d12 and it's simply going to judge the way the enemy is going to act. Whether it's running the heroes or running the enemies at the heroes to thwack the heroes, or it's running the enemies at the heroes to, again, thwack them. Well, you guessed it. It's a very dogged, headstrong AI. I like the idea that they actually included the AI system for the game, but it would have been very nice if there would have been some variety in the AI besides charge at the heroes and attack them. Now, granted, there are some bosses going to do a couple different crazy things. Some are going to summon extra minions. Some are going to do a couple different strange things, which are going to add to the variety. But overall, there's not much variety in the AI, and it feels like they could have done better with AI here. It feels like it was pretty much kind of a missed chance to make something that could have been really, really great. You have this idea for this AI where some interesting things are going to happen once in a while, especially when you combine the AIs of these enemies with the special missions made specifically for the bosses. That's where the AI kind of really feels like it's trying its best to try to kill you. The rest of the time, it feels like they're just rushing forward into your flailing arms of heroes, their giant rotating arm Cuisinarts, which are just slaughtering the enemies left and right. Because unless you're going for some of the decapitations, the enemy AI just feels dumb. It literally feels like it's just running towards the heroes in an effort to get taken down by the giant Cuisinart. Now, Warhammer Quest Cursed City itself seeks to take all the gameplay evolutions of Blackstone Fortress and return Warhammer Quest to its fantasy roots, but now it's in the age of Sigmar. Now, if you're not familiar with Warhammer Quest, it's pretty much the granddaddy of all dungeon crawlers. It's been around for well over 30 years, and you have mechanics that are still heavily borrowed today. You can see games such as Shadows of Brimstone as a really good example of some of these mechanics of how they've evolved or how they've changed throughout the years. Now, some of these changes we see here are a simpler AI We also see the concept of leveling their heroes up to level 5. We see that's easier to heal wounds. We see a much more cinematic feel of wading through hordes of enemies, multiple different mission types, and an interesting system where you need to permanently defeat bosses in order to bypass the level caps. But this is definitely not Silver Tower though. It's more of an evolution of everything that's ever been included in all the Warhammer Quest games. Some things are for the better, and unfortunately some things are for the worse. Now this is a game where luck is dominant here to the point that luck can literally win the day more often than skill. Dice can be generous or punishing. You compound this with the fact that an earlier level are fairly easy. You might feel that the only way you can lose is if the dice are basically not in your favor. Whether it's poor activation rolls, failed defense rolls, or the perfect enemy AI, activations will create a challenge, or more often than not, your heroes will easily wade through the enemies, since one-shotting enemies is an extremely common occurrence. It's easiest to walk up there, roll the dice, and take out an enemy without even doing a dang thing to our heroes. And the game also suggests that rolling to see which adventure you will encounter, but I would suggest not actually doing this because some of the adventures are actually easier than others. Any hunt with only 3 encounter cards is just going to be absolutely trivial for you. I can also say that you want to avoid wimping out the encounters by picking weaker enemies. Don't do it. Try to pick the tougher enemies because it's going to make the game a little bit more challenging. Not challenging enough, but when you're talking about these random adventures that you have to go through an effort to level up to get towards the bosses, it's the minimum thing you're going to need to make the game a little more challenging by bringing out the more tougher enemies any chance you get, because otherwise it's a cakewalk. Now, one thing I report here is that this is your typical Games Workshop high quality of components here. The models are board gamers' dream here, but at the same time, they're kind of a miniature war gamer's nightmare. Thankfully, these are Games Workshop's finest push-fit miniatures. They have a very high quality, they're extremely easy to put together, and I will probably say these are the best push-fit miniatures that they've ever produced. Sure, a board gamer might find them a little bit time consuming to put together when you're trying to put your game together, but the assembly is actually a breeze. War gamers are going to be a little bit unhappy though that there's not a lot of customization here. The biggest amount of customization you're going to have here is with these skeletons right here, where you may have 1 or 2 different poses, whether they're going to lean to the left or they're going to lean a little bit to the right, or you're going to have the undead who are either going to have a spike on their back, or they're going to have a spike through their head, or they're going to have a spike through their back, whatever. Not much variety, but there is a little bit amount of variety here. But from a board gaming standpoint, I can actually appreciate this. I think they went the right standpoint for a board game. Granted, we know Games Workshop likes to cut the edge between a board gamer and a miniatures gamer, and we know they generally go towards the miniatures gamer. And we also know that there's already stats for all these in all of Games Workshop's miniatures games, so we know what the eventual goal was. But it's nice that you get a little bit of variety here. Probably not enough to make the miniature gamers happy, but more than enough to make your average board gamer extremely happy. Now, having said that, though, some players are going to be a little bit frustrated with the fact that there's no way to differentiate the miniatures when it comes to different hordes. It's quite possible to have multiple hordes where you have one card that is going to be based on 3 zombies, and you're going to have another card that's also going to be based on 3 zombies, and they'll be moving across, and there's no way to differentiate them. Now, of course, Games Workshop is going to be assuming that you're going to be painting all these miniatures, but for people who aren't going to be painting them, it would have been nice to get some kind of way to differentiate these miniatures so you can tell which card they went through. Even it would have been something as simple as just a token, or even if we could have got some kind of snap-on for the bases. I know that would add to the cost of the game, but that would have been something that's very nice, something kind of a toss-out to the board gamers, because a lot of board gamers are enjoying Games Workshop's board games. Games Workshop actually makes pretty good board games. Now, they're not always great, but they do generally make some very good board games when they put their mind to it. Some of their board games are actually enjoyable for the board gaming hobbyist. Unfortunately, it does look like Games Workshop assumes that you're not going to be putting these miniatures back in the box, because there's no way to get all these miniatures back in the box without risking damaging them. These are the more brittle style plastic, which means they have much finer details, but you can see that these are extremely hard plastic and they're going to snap extremely easily. I would highly recommend going down to Michael's, and I did it myself, and I went and picked up a plastic tub. And these plastic tubs are extremely nice. What you can do is you take one of these plastic tubs, put a magnetic strip in here to put all your miniatures in, and then you magnetize the base of all the miniatures and just simply stick them in the tub. And they fit in here perfectly like that. They're not going to move around, but that's going to be something that most of your board gamers are not going to want to do it. So it is unfortunate that you're not going to be able to fit these all back in the box, again, unless you want to risk breaking some of these miniatures. And for what they pay for this game, this is a $200 board game. You probably don't want to do that. At least not risking breaking these miniatures, because that's a pain in the neck to try to glue them back together. And some of these pieces are thin enough that gluing them back together is not going to be something you're going to be able to do. Now, to me, this is kind of a letdown, especially as much care Games Workshop put towards the extra bling factor for Blackstone Fortress. With its fancy hero bags, thicker cardboard, less fragile miniatures, but maybe Blackstone kind of spoiled us because Cursed City is a lot closer to Silver Tower, which had the easy to break miniatures and the thinner cardboard too. Maybe this is why we kind of lost Blackstone. It was just too expensive for Games Workshop to keep producing. A lot of great stuff, but they couldn't keep that price going. And of course, we know that price is a legitimate concern, but this is the price that we're going to pay for these kind of components produced where people earn a fair wage. Games Workshop makes all their miniatures and all their molds in Nottingham, so value for your dollar is going to be the real question for players here if they want to spend $200 for this box set here. Now, the box itself has a decent amount of replay in it. Looking at a pure number standpoint, we said there is an extremely large count of adventures here. You have multiple different adventures that come in with the game, whether it's the preset maps itself. They obviously did not fall into the pit of minimalism that they had with Hammer Hall, which we knew did not have a lot of adventures. Cursed City should offer at least 15 plus plays. You can break it down looking at 3 runs per level, and you need to be level 4 to tackle the final dungeon boss. You also need to balance the fear and the influence, which may influence when you need to tackle some of the dungeons. So thanks to some clever mechanics, if a fear or influence ever hits 10, the heroes lose the entire campaign. The only guaranteed way to lower these levels is by tackling certain styles of dungeons. The hunts and deliverance, plus if you want to improve your gear, you want to tackle at least 1 or 2, maybe 3 scavenge missions, but they do raise the fear and the influence, forcing you to tackle more hunts and deliverance to balance the scavenging missions themselves. So you can expect a nice possible flow of doing a hunt, a deliverance, a scavenge, and then you're probably going to go ahead and do a decapitate where you're going to take out one of these grand bosses. The game does come with 21 preset maps, 16 of which that you can randomly encounter, plus the randomized maps, and 8 heroes means that there's going to be a second playthrough. Wouldn't really be unheard of for a lot of players. Heck, I know I plan myself on playing this game again with my youngest son, and I imagine we'll have a different experience because we're going to pick different heroes, different paths, we may get different skill ups and different abilities. We also can't neglect the fact that the game has rules to level up to level 5, but this adventure story itself was only written to get the heroes to level 4. This to me suggests that they at least planned at one point future expansions, and I imagine they will probably come out, price being not a problem for Games Workshop, hopefully. Now, all this sounds great on paper until you realize that until you get to the decapitations, the game can be an eye-roll, super darn easy game. Until you get to the first decapitation, you may wonder if you're playing the game wrong because it's just so easy unless the dice are just not in your favor. Now, I thought the 4 different style missions with 4 distinct victory conditions was a brilliant move, and as easy as they were, I wanted to keep playing the deliverance missions for the randomness they offered and for the retro goodness it brought to the game. Decapitations felt like where the difficulty should have been for each one of the missions though. Even if I was stupidly lucky enough to pick the right hero to get the win versus Radukar. For those of you who played earlier games in the series, the updated move and the run rules were actually a great addition to the game. They kind of make you to force you to make decisions with your activation dice. It's no longer just using the 1 for your move all the time. Maybe a 3 might be better. In theory, the city's fear and influence was also another great idea that really could have added to the decisions if losing missions was a greater fear. Crisis has added to the flavor of the world, creating some great flavor text mid-mission that added to the theme of the land in peril, but they never should have been randomly occurring. They should have occurred in some kind of order so you don't repeat that gallows mission for the 5th time. Or even my playthrough, you see me get the same story twice. That's dumb. Heroes leveling up and the level capping until you beat bosses was also a really nice, brilliant inclusion here. It gives you objectives, that you feel like your heroes are growing in power on their way to face Radukar. And the 8 heroes in this day and age where a game companies think 5 is a magic number just to include in every single box was awesome. I thought that was great to include that many heroes. It adds variety, it adds incentive to play the game, and let's face it, when it comes to components, these components look really, really awesome. Now there's a couple areas where the game really does need work. I've already mentioned a couple, but death needs to be more present. It's fairly uncommon to suffer a complete wipe. Death rolls for heroes being knocked out should be more deadly, or enemies need to live longer than it takes a hero to run up and mow them down en masse. Fear and influence on paper was a great idea, but it never was an issue beyond forcing you to alternate mission types. I never once was even close to either one of these meters reaching level 10. I think the worst I saw was a 7 in fear, but I could be mistaken. I think that's the worst I ever saw. And that was actually due to a crisis that just gave me one more point of fear. So that was the worst I ever got there. I would love to see more ways to manipulate this and add to the challenge. Why not enemies that raise the influence if allowed to escape? Maybe enemies who raise fear if you knock out a hero. All these ideas would have made death a real concern for my mighty Cuisinart heroes and added to the challenge of the game. There really isn't a reason to switch heroes between missions. This was supposed to be a story of 8 ragtag misfits saving a city, yet I use the same heroes every single time I play the game. And I use those same heroes during the playthrough because those are heroes that just work for me. Thank goodness I actually use these heroes though, because they actually made the final battle versus Radukar a big difference. No spoilers, but having the right heroes made a huge difference in the final battle against Radukar. I would love to have reason to switch out my heroes during the missions though. Maybe some mandatory pincher missions where you pre-select 2 heroes who have to take one mission path and maybe 2 other heroes have to go down this other mission path. Force you to separate your heroes, where they kind of had this almost in place with the level 2 and 3 decapitations though. But they each required 2 separate journeys for 2 separate boss fights, so the theme was definitely there. How about a vengeance mission using Glorio? If alive needs to help kill the triplets. Wouldn't that be cool if he's alive, you actually have to take him to go attack the triplets? Now I know I'm getting into story spoiler territory here, but to me that would have been awesome. I think it's perfectly written in the story for Glorio himself to have to go after the triplets. Not doing any spoilers, but it definitely is important to the storyline. It's something they could have done. That's just something that could have made it more fun for me. Also, where in the game was the enemy tactic variety? Sure, monsters have some special abilities, disease, go after the most injured hero, but in the end it was simply move towards heroes and thwack the heroes. Without the decapitation missions changing things up a little, it gets very samey very quickly. I quickly felt the missions were nothing but a level up gear speed bump for the eventual decapitation mission that I wanted to go to take out these bad guys. Worse, without the randomized dungeons, I would almost accuse the hunts and scavenges as being cheap filler with very minimal challenge unless you play bad or the dice just flat out hate you. Even the grade tide itself, while a fantastic idea, is a pushover to stay ahead of because enemies just die way too easily. I never once was caught by the grave tide in any one of my playthroughs. Even the slow dwarf himself could save quickly ahead of this Gravetide. Either the heroes are hitting too hard or the enemies need one more hit point. The enemy leveled up sides could probably be a better baseline for where the enemy should be starting every one of these missions. The adventure difficulty is all over the place. It's like the team made 5 dungeons and said, oh man guys, we need more than 5 dungeons to sell this game for $200. Quick, throw in some extra content. To be blunt, this game feels like they had 2 very distinct skill teams making the game. Let's call them Team A, who designed the decapitations, and Team B, who designed the AI variety and the standard missions for the rest of the game. And for some strange reason, no one thought to share notes or team meeting or anything to make it go, hey guys, let's kind of steal ideas and make the rest of the game better. A good case in point, tell me how Varkskar and Torglus can be level 4 and 5 encounters. I mean, seriously, this is blatantly wrong and lazy. Well, I guess I can see if they planned for an expansion and they want to keep using these cards, but I won't say more to avoid spoilers. Just know, it's impossible to happen. So why isn't it on the cards? It shows they didn't plan for a thing. Here's the kicker though, the ideas were good. Even the deliverance missions could have been exciting with the Gravetide chasing you down if only the AI was better, and this isn't because of the D12 versus the D20 of Blackstone Fortress. It's because you mow down the hordes before they do anything half the time, since they literally run into your team of Cuisinarts. I'm about to enter spoiler territory here, so if you want to fast forward to the timestamps below, feel free to do so, but some wonky things occurred during the boss fights. For example, boss fights will have you shuffling the hero initiative cards. Do you replace them in the same order again? New order? No idea. The rules never cover it. So I started basically using a D12. 1 to 3, hero 1, 4 to 6, hero 2, etc. The family ties mission. Is there an error in it? Do the triplets share a space with their phylactery during setup? Stun doesn't work on decapitation boss fights. Yep, things are a little tougher here, but the decapitations where the challenge was, regular missions were nice, but the early levels were more victim to RNG, random numbers, for challenge. Expect to only die or wipe on a decapitation missions unless your dice are blessed. Heck, Torglus was a fairly good challenge, or maybe that was just my dice luck, but I think that's where the difficulty level should have been, on Torgalus and up on the special missions for the bosses. That's how the base game should have been. Now the gameplay is fine from 1 to 4 players. I'm really happy to report that playing it solo with 4 heroes is just as fun as playing with 3 friends. Now the final thing here is, did I like the game? Yes, no, why? Well, yes I do. Does the game have its warts? Yes, it definitely does. Honestly though, the gripe here is 2/3 of the game is easy and 1/3 of the game is set about where things should be. Yet to me it's entertaining in a more cinematic way. John Wick moments abound until a boss puts you in your place. Not everyone is going to feel this though, and maybe rightfully say the rest of the missions are boring, pointless filler. Again, back to that love or hate that Cursed City is going to create. Do I want more out of the game? Yes, I do. But there's enough in the content box for me to get at least 20 plays out of it. There's enough here that I want to play the game again. I felt the same way about Silver Tower, but that gave you different reasons to actually want to replay it. That's where Silver Tower succeeded so darn well. So Warhammer Quest, Cursed City, this feels like an intro to what could have been better things. With some minor tweaks, what we have here can actually be really good. Heck, just spitballing ideas here, I wonder if giving every single enemy 1 more hit point would be just the bump it needs. The decapitations give me hope for the future of the game. The rest feels like it needs work though. The game comes with a phenomenal amount of awesome models. They include a nice leveling system with upgrading gear cards, but don't hold your breath on that final envelope that we all know from Blackstone Fortress, which is really, really cool. All you fans are going to be really disappointed here. Not to give away spoilers, but you're going to be disappointed here. Now, it sounds like I'm being negative here, yet in a world where people spent millions to play Hero Quest again, comparing that to a game for $150 with this game going for $200, Cursed City really isn't terrible. It just feels like it could have been more. Right now, I can play this game with my youngest son, and he can feel cool mowing down hundreds of hordes of bad guys. And I honestly want to play Cursed City again, since I kind of rushed through the entire game so darn quickly just so I can do an honest and fair review of the entire game. Not playing a couple missions, but playing the entire game. And yes, I defeated Radukar at the end. Now, we know that there's going to be an eventual expansion, or we can hope it would happen. And when it gets here, I want them to give me smarter AI, something besides charge stupidly forward. Give me archer and spellcaster enemies. Maybe an enemy that runs for help that you need to kill so you don't get overwhelmed. There are numerous easy, great ideas to throw in here. In the future, I want more story and less whims of random. Less, oh look, the gallows again. Who should I send? Again. That's twice I mentioned that story event. I think I might actually hate the gallows storyline at this point because I've seen it so many times. Heck, I think a lot more should have been less the victim of randomness here, but that's basically the bottom line here. Give us more set story, less random main story, more challenging enemies. Keep the random dungeons mixed in, though add the nice bit of nostalgia. They were a great inclusion. It's not all doomed though, far from it, and heck, ignoring the fact that Cursed City is like watching a great movie and seeing where the budget literally ended, much like the Wonder Woman movie. Many parts of this game can easily be fixed or even helped. I would suggest a good start is adding 1 hit point to all enemies and all mission types except decapitations, which is where we see all the budget went into for this game. Unfortunately, sadly, it does seem like Games Workshop is continuing the trend that has been going strong since Execution Force, where every other release is less than its predecessor. Silver Tower was great. Hammerhall, forgettable. Blackstone Fortress was great, and now Cursed City sits like it's looking up to the lofty goals set by its predecessor. Cursed City feels like they reach for the stars. Parts hit the moon, while the other parts are falling off the rocket. If you're okay with the difficulty that is literally all over the place, simpler AI, filler missions, and 5 real missions that are worth actually playing, then you're good. Otherwise, sit back, wait for the first expansion, and see if things improve. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed this video series. If you have any comments or questions, make sure you leave them down in the YouTube comments down below. I'll be sure to get to them as quickly as I can. You can also feel free to email me off-the-shelf board game reviews. That's otsbgr@gmail.com. I'll be sure to answer your emails as quickly as I can. If you enjoy this channel and if you enjoy the content, think about tossing $1 over in the tip jar over at Patreon. That's patreon.com/otsbgr. Just $1 in the tip jar can help me cover my costs, help keep the lights on, and help me bring out more content for you that you all enjoy. If you enjoy this video, series, click that like button, click that subscribe button. As always, thanks for watching.